Folks, so this is the third part of our Cetatea de Scaun in Suceava visit, and I thought I'd give you guys a look. The miniature version of this fortress back in the day. Okay, this is what it would have looked like, during the time that it was built. And it was being utilized by the, inhabitants of the citadel. So this is the tower bridge, and they would drop down the plank so people can walk and enter into the citadel. So there's a drawbridge that was basically utilized to protect another, level of protection that was devised by the architect of the citadel. So, they were pretty well versed back then on how to best protect their citadel from invaders. And we're going to go inside the Moldovan armory, since this was a former Moldovan district. So y'all can see the weapons, medieval weapons that they utilize. So just to give you guys an idea, the difference between a knight in Western European military versus a knight in Eastern European military is the level of training and their social status in the community. In Western Europe, the knights were special soldiers that were, specially selected by the kings, queens, and the round tables or advisors of the kings. Here, that's not the case. They weren't as sophisticated as Western European knights. They were basically developed to specifically do a task, but their function was pretty unique. They weren't, even though they weren't selected the way as Western European kingdoms selected their, military, their overall function is actually much more difficult and more advanced than the Western European kingdoms, because they were having to operate outside of just protecting, their king. They are actually also making weapons, preserving crops, and maintaining the grounds of this citadel. So they were multi-purpose soldiers in Eastern Europe, and that is fairly interesting to consider, because yes, they did get certain special privileges, but they were functioning at a much more optimal level in terms of management of the citadel. All right, folks, I'm gonna be going into the foreigners about Moldova. That's room. So they've had quite a bit of foreigners that came over to visit Moldova back in the days. So like I was saying, they're operating at a much more optimal level. They didn't operate similar to Western European kingdoms, but they had a structure and system that is fairly unique and much stronger than some other Western kingdoms. Just because of, you know, their overall strategic location. So basically they had Polish, British, you know, Italian visitors, you know, pretty much throughout various principalities of Europe. But a lot of what they had intended to do was unite the kingdoms initially. So they were being consulted by many other European kingdoms and societies. Anyway, let's see whatever else we can come across. Over here is the smithery, where they created their own monetary system. So they create medieval coins. So the coins used in the medieval Moldova came from domestic mints as well as from other countries, Poland, Hungary, and Italian states, the Ottoman Empire, which is Turkey. The first Moldovan coin was issued by Petru I Musat in 1375 to 1391. Silver groats with the coat of arms of Moldova on the observes and the personal coats of arms of the Lord on the reverse. The text written in Latin on the edge. Most of the lords of Moldova issued silver and bronze coins, the only gold coins being issued by Voivoda Depot in the fortress of Suceava, a coin mint operated during the region of Voivoda Dabija. So that's what the bars, the gold bars and the silver bars that they were using would look like. And that's how they make them. All right. So these were the tools that they were using. And this was pretty much, you know, was the treasury, central bank, and their deposit. So imagine having that centralized location where people use their tender to create their economic, you know, vibrancy back in the day. And here are the coat of arms during the medieval times. So imagine this looking like that back then. And they were definitely very different compared to other kingdoms. But overall, it's a very sophisticated system, you know. They were great system developers, you know, which is, you know, fairly consistent with the Romanian society and culture. They operate based on a system. And, you know, for some people, they didn't realize how Romanians were because of the culture. But back in the medieval times, they had to specifically create their own system in order for them to develop and justify their growth, and they were operational. So it's not, you know, a bad thing to create you know, a system that they fully want to preserve. And I think if you look at history and society back in the day, most societies that have created a structure or system that can be replicated by the next generation to the following generation tend to flourish. That's, you know, true in the Western kingdoms throughout their, you know, legal, religious, and governmental system, and that's also true in the Eastern kingdoms. But very few people realize that today systems are still being utilized, but some of them are no longer relevant. So make sure when you're comparing historical systems, because history is based on systems, there has to be a structure, and you have to develop that structure in order to govern back in the medieval times. Today, most of the governmental systems are starting to erode because of, technology and the advancement of society. But this civilization is definitely one of the most advanced civilizations I've seen so far in Europe. And I've traveled from Ireland all the way to Eastern Europe, so I'm comparing some of the civilizations that I've seen throughout Europe. And by far, I would say that the medieval system in Romania back then is probably one of the most advanced. With that said, let me show you what the crowns, the replica of the crowns, looks like. And the chalice and the swords here in their treasury.